what is the mental model that your founder has, right? How do they think about growth or developing people, right? You have to understand that before you see any change.
When you have people inside your organization interacting with this obnoxious jerk, there's the cost of miscollaboration, there's the cost of the quality of work. And if you have one person impacting 10 people, you're impacting the performance of 10 against 1.
Basically say, am I adding value?
Welcome back to a new episode of Organized Chaos, the podcast for founders and leaders who are ready to scale their businesses to 9 figures by turning HR into rocket fuel for their growth. I'm your host, Nahat Kairala, and today I am excited to introduce you to someone who's been in the trenches with fast-growing companies, helping them navigate one of their most critical challenges, building and leading high-performing teams. Meet Daneal Charney, fractional HR leader and executive coach, and the founder of 5X. Daneal has spent her career working with startups and scaling companies, helping founders avoid the people-related pitfalls that can make or break a business. She's passionate about concepts like founder stage fit, healthy conflict, and strategic leadership development, all topics that are absolutely crucial when you're scaling rapidly. What I love about Daneal's approach is that she doesn't just talk theory. She's been there, done that, and has the battle scars and success stories to prove it. Whether you're wondering when to bring in HR leadership, struggling with team dynamics, or looking to level up your own leadership skills, this conversation is one you don't want to miss. Now let's dive into today's episode with Daneal Charney, and I hope you enjoy it. Daneal, thank you very much for joining the Organized Chaos podcast. I'm super pumped to have you here. For those who don't know you, I would love it if you could walk us through your journey in HR and leadership coaching and what got you to this point.
Okay. Yeah, well, believe it or not, I started more than 25 years ago, and I started in leadership development, which is, I sort of fell into, you could say that was my first love, and it was part of HR. I was a natural leader. Even in school, I was the one who always sat in the front, put their hand up, wanted to know more. We would get an assignment, and I would be the geek who said yeah, I know we got this assignment, but let's do this, right? And so fast forward early in my career, I was also, looked at my job description as 60% of what I could do. And then, said, what can I do? What am I interested in the organization? I was also, always interested in the white space. So my sort of philosophy is you drive your career and that people have personal responsibility to do what is best for the business. And not sure, have you heard of the book Extreme Ownership?
Yes.
Okay. So I just read it this summer and I was like, this is the way I've looked at my career. And I look at, he talks a lot about leaders leading with extreme ownership. But I think in startups, individual contributors, are just as important to saying, is what I do day to day, is that adding value to the business, right? And it's just the idea of, no excuses, no blame for the things that happen and really feeling like you have control. So that kind of led me to my second love, which is becoming a coach, because I believe people are creative and resourceful and we don't need to tell them what to do. And so the sage on the stage with leadership development just didn't resonate with me because we are experts in our own lives. So if I'm going to help you solve a problem, it's going to be really understanding your desired state and how to help you get there through challenging you, through giving you feedback, through asking, powerful questions. So that's why I became a certified coach and have sort of built on that by even becoming a conflict coach. And we'll talk a bit about conflict in a bit.
Yes.
But that kind of led me to my third love, which is I was in the corporate world and just feeling like a square trying to fit in a round hole. Why is this not working? Why am I spending my time trying to add value and these people are creating PowerPoint presentations? And so I was just like, this can't be it. So I went on maternity leave and started to consult with this company that turned out to be a startup. And I'm like, I love this, the chaos, the innovation. So I found my people Thank goodness. And that was like 15 years ago. And my mantra since then has been, life is short, join a startup.
I love that. Startups are
Yeah,
exciting.
startups are exciting. And really, what you can get it for a year in a startup is what you get for 4 years in a corporate
Oh, yeah.
role. It's up to you. Like, it's up to you how much you want to do, how much you want to learn, how much you want to jump into things. And I've just seen that. I firmly believe that. So that led me to sort of like being an advisor to startups. For the last 8 years, I've worked with hundreds of B2B software companies, and I've had a view of the challenges of growing from very early seed stage to later stage, with working with Mars as an executive in residence. And then the last 6 months-ish, I've started my own business called 5X. And, I bring a toolbox of templates and in HR things, but I really don't lead with an HR hat. I lead with, being curious as a coach about what my client is trying to solve.
No, that's great. Great intro, Daneal. Love it. Two things I'll highlight from what you said. First off, you're making me look bad because I always sat at the back of my class. Wasn't the one raising their hand to get stuff done at the beginning. Was kicked out of class every couple of months. My parents
You're
would
a procrastinator too.
yeah, I mean, I used to be more than I am today, but I was just a troublemaker early on.
Oh,
But I was good in school, which was my saving grace. Otherwise, I would have been kicked out completely.
okay.
So that helped. The second thing, though, I love that you brought up the whole ownership of your career situation, because a topic I talk about frequently, especially in startups, is the mentality to succeed in a startup is unique. You cannot expect as an individual contributor, even as a leader, that you're just going to stay there and exist and then things are going to happen to you, right? And then
Mhm.
you're going to grow organically. You're going to be receiving all this training and development.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, in a startup, first of all, let's be honest, no one has time for you that early on. They
Mm,
basically want you to come in. They
mhm.
want you to take ownership, right? If there's something you need to learn, we all recognize we don't understand it or don't know it. Let's learn it and let's do it, right? If
Right.
it works, great. It doesn't work, let's see what went wrong and let's go at it again. So the mindset is so different. And
So, mhm.
I'm sure, and you mentioned something about conflict, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about because a lot startups and conflict go hand in hand, right? But
That's a really good point. The mindset is so different because I've had hundreds of people approach me and say, "Yeah, I want to move into the startup world." And telling them what it's going to be, I like, and them experiencing two different things.
yeah,
100%.
exactly, exactly. So, Danielle, I'm going to take us back to the first conversation you and I had,
Mhm,
before this recording. And when we were having this chat, you brought up the concept of founder stage fit and
mhm.
how really a mismatch can be fatal for a company. It's it was a very interesting concept to me. So, I would love if you could elaborate on what that means specifically, and why do you think it is such a critical element? And if you have any examples you can give us from things you've seen, would be great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, some of the more mature companies I work with, some of the founders and CEOs actually on a regular basis, yearly, think about their role. And they basically say, am I adding value or am I the chief bottleneck officer, right? Like, am I spending time on the right things? Am I, growing this business? Am I getting out of the weeds? Am I working on the business instead of in the business? Because there's just a difference as you grow. And even early on, when you hire a team of 10 people, right? Like, the biggest problem founders have is letting go of their baby, but it's the only way the organization grows, and that every person can add value is for you to kind of pass the baton and really think about, what do you need to really lead and what do they need to lead. You can both own the sales process, you can own sales, but the founder, maybe sales strategy, working with big clients or over X dollars, the person who's head of sales may be something different. So you really need to define that. And Yeah. So I worked with a founder where I was actually responsible helping them hire. But what I noticed in their team would come to me, being, having that HR hat on and complain because that founder really was the chief bottleneck officer. Like they would jump into client meetings where they were supposed to focus on, they were a very technical founder. They were supposed to be focusing on leading the product into its next evolution. They would jump into customer meetings, come late, confuse everyone, and just, you know, example after example where the founder was saying, like, I know I'm supposed to, and I just don't know what to do. That founder was unfortunately replaced, the board replaced them, and that can happen. I worked with a startup last year where, they had hired their first non-founder. She was a sales and operation person. And the three of them, the two co-founders, the CTO and CEO, they were in conflict with this person they'd hired. Mostly the CEO, really. The CTO was trying to mediate this conversation, and she was spending 25% of her time, which is, obviously taking away from the business. In meeting with all of them, what was very clear is the founder had not passed the baby. They had not passed ownership, had not defined really what she needed to do, where she needed to be spending her time, and the sales and operation person. And so that's what the conflict resolution was about. It was about rebuilding trust and really using the RACI framework to define,
Yeah.
what I do, what you do, and also passing decision rights, because this sales and operation person was traveling everywhere and had to ask the founder, check in with the founder for everything and every little dollar she spent, and was just feeling not trusted, was ready to leave, was just like, I'm so frustrated. And so, yeah, founder stage fit.
Yeah, I've seen. I love that those examples that you gave. I've seen this a lot. I've talked about this a lot, like even on my socials and even some episodes before. Is founders, although they have good intentions, when they start growing, the intention is, hey, we're bringing in more people. I want them to help the company grow. But to your point, that passing of the baton is easier said than done, because a lot of times, what I've seen, my personal experience with founders has been that they have taken the company from zero to where it is today. And they assume and they believe to the core that they are going to be the people who are going to take it to the next milestone and the next milestone. It's always going to be them who's going to lead it to the promised land.
Right.
What I've seen a lot of times with founders, especially the first time founders, is that a lot of them are specialists in a specific area of the business, right? Like they might be a product person, they might be an engineer person, they might be someone on the sales side and so forth. Yes, they reach to a certain stage of growth, but, and you've seen this probably on your end more than I have, is that they inherit that CEO role over time as the company grows, and they're not well equipped for it. They're only equipped for a portion of the business. And if they keep holding on to it, they keep making mistake after mistake, and they just I've seen companies and I've seen founders actually crash their business because they just refuse to hand the baton. And it's very difficult.
Well,
It's very
nobody sees that their JD is like, really, as you grow, like it can be in a later stage, like 50% of your job description could be, or more, is to lead through others. Like
correct.
essentially enable others. But like you said, like who holds them accountable? Who says, like, this is the number one thing you need to do, you need to work on?
Yes, exactly. So, and when we were first, when you were giving your intro, Daneal, you talked a little bit about, you mentioned conflict.
Yeah.
You and I have spoken again offline on multiple occasions, and you've mentioned to me before that healthy conflict is inevitable as you scale your team. I'd love it if you can dive a bit more into that concept, and even if you have some more examples like the great ones you just gave, would love to hear them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just think about it. Even co-founders will get into conflict, right? Like the minute you have more than one person and a partnership, you get into conflict, right? And I recently, unfortunately, heard through a friend and was chatting with her where, she is breaking up with the other founders and going through a legal battle over IP because she didn't have the open dialogue kind of conversations, even at an early stage, which you absolutely need to have when you're forging the partnership, about like the what ifs, right? What if it turns out that we're not the right founders, right?
Yeah.
So she's going through that. So healthy conflict is about open dialogue and openly disagreeing, but then committing in the end. I've been working with a team who's over 50 people for about 3 years now. And at the beginning, one of the things we started working on, and it's taken us more than a year and a half, is healthy conflict. And how it was showing up is there was silos building. So there was a lot of us and them. There was, initiative would get executed, but people wouldn't actually fully buy in. They'd say, we're all doing this, but then this department would do one thing and this department would do another thing. This is obviously a little bit of a bigger organization, but if you start to build a culture of radical candor and open dialogue from the beginning and not avoid conversations like that very early stage founder I talked about, then you create this culture of, and so this is from the words of the CEO, like, what are the benefits of healthy conflict? He always talks about, like, now I can push to a decision that we actually all align on. And I know that it's probably gonna result in increase in revenue or decrease in cost because we all fully buy into it and we're all fully, giving our 100%. So that full alignment comes when you're actually willing to, make a decision or disagree. And, because we've all been in corporate settings where you circle back to the same thing. Oh my God, again, are we talking about in this meeting? Like like startups they're burning through crafts. They cannot afford not to end every meeting with a decision, solved problem, next step, right? Like I believe so strongly in that, right? And so healthy conflict helps the best idea win. It helps you continuously improve and it helps you make decisions. Speed. I think that's what startups are all about, right?
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And to your point, especially that company example you gave, like that 50-person mark, that is typically kind of the inflection point I see with a lot of companies. That 40 to 50 headcounts is where you start seeing those initial signs of some fracturing in case they're there, siloing happening, and all that kind of stuff. So it's fine. Well, it's fine. So
my dog is upset with the conflict.
Yes. I mean, hey, I don't blame him. So yeah, I mean, typically at that size, 40 to 50 is where you start seeing some of that conflict happen as well. So I love that you mentioned radical candor. I love that you mentioned, healthy conflict. But I'm not a coach, and this is where I'm going to toss this over to you to help guide whoever's listening. But there are cases where I've seen, and again, I don't know the answer to this one, but sometimes founders or even leaders take this to the extreme where radical candor becomes pretty heavy-handed in terms of feedback. But also there are cases where conflict, this whole disagree, but let's align and move on, gets dominated by a few people in the organization who have standing, who are close to the founder, who've been there for a long time. And it ends up defeating the whole purpose of healthy conflict and making sure that the organization is moving as one. As a coach and someone who's been in these situations before, probably, what are some watch outs that you would have for situations like this? Or what are some things that you think a company that's experiencing this can do to sort of veer back on track as opposed to go into the sort of the dark side of doing this?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the radical candor approach, I mean, what sort of describing, I'd say, is sort of obnoxious aggression or, the technical jerks, right? Like,
Exactly.
I actually spend quite a bit of time looking at the cost of these technical jerks, right? And actually, because it's interesting because it's not just that it creates this unhealthy poison culture and some people leave, but it creates a green light for other people to behave in this way, right? So it's acknowledging that we are creating this culture of obnoxious aggression, and almost like it's interesting when I've gotten together with teams and I've said, which box are you in? And there's 4 boxes for radical candor. Most are in the avoiding. But then there's always like a very small percentage where it's like obnoxious aggression. Like you said, you've got to you've got to say, hey, you got to call it out. You've got to decide whether, are those people, can those people change? If they don't change, what is this going to mean to our culture? What's like, let's really think about the cost of this, because I have, as you said, I've seen companies say, I have to keep this VP of sales. Like, I know that they are not good with people. And I'm like, okay, so let's really play this out in 1 or 2 years. Who are you going to lose? What is going to be your reputation for candidates who are not going to join your company? Who, what are the other things that could happen with your customers? I have had CEOs had to, go and apologize to customers or mend things with customers. Like, you really need to play it out. And I think work with that person, if they're not aware, to be aware of how they're impacting others. So it's, could be assessment tool, coaching. Otherwise, you really have to figure out what that cost is and whether you're willing to live with it. Because it's not a life thing. It infects the culture, right?
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of times, to your point, I think founders and business leaders, they weigh the cost only from a perspective of this person and their output versus, losing XYZ person and their recruitment cost. But something that also what I've seen they forget a lot is that when you have people inside your organization interacting with this obnoxious jerk, their performance is not going to be as good as it could be. They're not going to engage with this individual. They're probably going to try to avoid them. So there's the cost of, that miscollaboration. There's the cost of the quality of work. There's the cost of velocity. There's a lot of things. And if you have one person impacting 10 people, you're impacting the performance of 10 against 1. And unless this person is a unicorn, right, there is no way their output is surpassing that of 10 good performers. So a lot of times, it's the cost is pretty significant, and it's to founders. I even once went into a math exercise about this, where we sort of drilled down into output metrics and things of that sort, and the numbers were kind of eye-watering to the founder. Like, oh my god, this is how much this could potentially be costing us. But that's where coaching comes in, right? Is you kind of put it in perspective and the right frame, so they can see it from the correct perspective and context to make the right decisions.
Yeah, and I think your job as a coach or advisor is to not just be a sounding board, but to be real. And I think most founders and CEOs I've worked with, they want that, because they're often like dominating visionary personalities, and they're like, nobody tells me things, right? Like, how do you see it? And so, this is how I see it. That's what I'm paid to do is you've said these things are important to you, but now you're behaving in a way that's incongruent. Like, do you want to do anything about that? Like,
exactly
part of your job.
You see, I love that. I love that final take, because it's kind of advice I also give to HR leaders sometimes, because I mean, you probably know this and have heard this too, is that HR doesn't usually have the best reputation in being a business advisor. They're more working in their own HR bubble and dealing with their own HR initiatives and so forth. But a lot of times, and the context I usually get in these conversations is that, well, the CEO or founder, they don't agree with our strategy, or they're not giving us budget to do this initiative, or they will not work with us to actually performance manage this individual. And a lot of times, it's kind of the point you just made, is that go back to what the founder's trying to achieve, and how is their current behavior and their unwillingness to actually do this actually hurting their own initiatives. Don't make it about what you're trying to do as the HR person, as the coach, as the leader. Always link it back to what they're trying to do and what's important to them, because that is the easiest path to get a leader to actually listen, acknowledge, and actually be willing to at least try and give you the benefit of the doubt.
I mean, I was talking about this with my daughter, who's an aspiring teacher, and it's like, you've got to meet people where they're at if you want to take them anywhere, right? Like, you've got to. And as a coach, we really learned to, like, what is the mental model that your founder has, right? Like, how do they think about growth or developing people, right? You have to understand that before you see any change. But, as you said, what matters to the business is where you have to start, right? Like, if what you're doing doesn't matter to the business, your approach is wrong. You don't understand. You're going to be
Not
frustrated
impactful.
all the time. Like, that's the place to start.
Exactly. No, I completely
Or
agree.
make
And
it matter. Make it matter. Like you said, show the numbers,
yes,
show the cost.
exactly. 100%. So I think it's a good segue to talk a bit about HR, since I actually called HR out a little bit ago and I belong to that crowd, which is kind of ironic. So for founders who are listening and who are trying to scale and grow, from
Mhm.
your experience and what you've seen before, when do you think is the right time to bring in an HR leader? And
Love this question.
yeah, so I'd love your take on this. And what are some of the things that you would think that they need to use to weigh their decision? What are the inputs? What are the things they need to think about?
Yeah, I love this because everyone's looking for the magic number and there isn't a magic number at all. To me, it's like, how complex is your business from a people point of view? And there's kind of three scenarios I think of. One is your business is growing very fast, you're hiring very fast. Therefore, you want to ramp people up to productivity very fast and have them hit the revenue per employee very fast. So when you're ramping up people and growing, your business is becoming more complex. You need a system to do that. You don't want people leaving after 3 months. What a waste of money. What a waste of people's time. You could be growing through acquisition as well. So you,
Mhm.
again, need someone who's going to integrate and basically get the benefit of the acquisition. So that's like part of scenario number one. Scenario number two is your team is remote and or global or both. And so that's legal, tax issues. And then I'd say you need to create collaboration, protocols, make sure your culture feels like it's integrated, time zones. So that's like scenario number two is you need to mitigate some risks and create like some collaboration protocols so that your team is working really well. And then last scenario is your business is under transformation. So I've worked for what I call restarts,
Yep.
where your business isn't doing well. You may be laying off people or figuring out ways to move people around. Again, that is a complexity that you don't want to leave to either, somebody who's just like, I'll be HR. When do I need to hire? And then is it more junior? Is it more a senior HR or a fractional?
I love that. I'm going to pull a thread on the last piece you mentioned. Do you need full time? Do you need senior? Do you need fractional? I'll give you a bit of a perspective on the conversations I've been having with a lot of founders, I would say over the past 3 to 4 months, is with the advent of AI and the pressures on HR to reduce and become more lean. I've heard a lot of founders, and I've heard it from multiple people over the past 3 to 4 months. They're questioning whether they even need an HR function to begin with. But the next thing I'm hearing is that, is HR a full-time job anymore? And will it be in the next couple of years? Because, and you know this, right, as well as I do, beyond the build stage of a startup, once things start stabilizing a little bit, there is a significant amount of work which can be probably classified in the more administrative kind of work for HR.
Mhm.
So I'm hearing a lot of founders talk about, well, instead of us hiring an HR leader and pay them X amount of money, we can get someone who's fractional because we don't think this is a full-time workload anymore, given that we're starting to stabilize and things will work well. What is your perspective on the full-time versus fractional and some of these conversations that are going on today, especially with technology and the pressure for companies to trim down on their costs and their headcount? And
Yes.
HR is one of those departments which is topping the charts when it comes to percentage of people laid off in their functions, in the grander scheme of things. So what's your perspective on that?
Yeah. Great question on the fractional. If a company has already built some of those HR operational processes so that they can hire people well, they understand how to on people and ramp them up to productivity. They have some of the, the contracts in place, the policies, Absolutely. I think fractional can be a very good option to a, under 75 person company. And it sort of makes sense because what you get with fractional is, you may only need a couple of days, um, when you're smaller. And if you have a strong leadership team, if you don't have a strong leadership team, you may need that additional HR to give you that perspective. But I think what fractional brings is, you have a seasoned person who has a lot of pattern recognition, who can really get to like pain points and opportunities very quickly for you, can help you make decisions on a weekly basis, like bigger decisions about org design or whatever, so that you're making the right decisions. And like I said, if like the wheels are already on the bus and you've already invested in those, that can just sort of go. Some people actually have HR more what I call operational as a fractional as well. They might have there's a company I know, and I do more of the leadership effectiveness coaching, and the other person does more of the people operations side. But I think fractional is also great to kind of like try before you buy and see what is the value of HR. Like, oh, I didn't know HR gets into org design or radical candor training. So it's a great way to sort of try out HR. I feel like I'm bragging a bit, but I think as a HR person, I bring like a bit of a triple threat because I've got the advisory, I've got the coaching, and I got the facilitator hat on. So yeah, I mean, I think fractional is a great option for companies that need someone like seasoned to help them make decisions in their business. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, something that you sort of reminded me to talk about is, HR is one of those functions. I've been seeing this as well, and a lot of HR colleagues that I've spoken to have pretty much spoken to me about this. Is that if you speak to 10 different HR people in 10 different organizations, you might hear them doing different things that the other was not doing within the scope of their work, right? You will hear, like, I have previously held an HR role where IT was under my remit. So I have seen other people who are doing so there's a person I know whose role is HR and operations. There's another person I know who's doing people operations and revenue operation. Like, this is mind blowing. They're all startups, of course, right? And what I've seen also, and sort of the thing you mentioned when you're sort of speaking, like you bring that triple threat, every HR leader that I know probably brings something unique to the table, to where it makes it also difficult from a founder's perspective, or, someone who is trying to hire a fractional leader. You're not comparing apples to apples, because also what I've seen and what I've heard also from others is that, and you mentioned this as well, founders, generally speaking, and business leaders, especially if they've never engaged with true, people leaders, they don't know what's the scope of the function, what it entails, what it covers, what it doesn't cover. And if they speak to 10 different people, they're probably going to see 10 different flavors of it, which makes it even a little bit more challenging for them. But then it becomes, hey, which flavor works best for your organization as well. So it's a pretty interesting space.
No, that's so true, because I've never really thought of HR as a department. I've just thought of it as under all departments, it's an enabling function, and it really is focused on performance. This is how I see I see the goal is to extend the lifetime value of employees by increasing performance or revenue per employee, and as well for the longest time possible, which is retention, right?
Yeah, no, that's it's such a business centric way of explaining it, which is kind of how it needs to be, right? As opposed to, we are here to have a great culture, and I mean, those are all important things, and those are all fuel to enable that. But I mean, the end goal, how you described it, I think is great.
I like what you said, because it's kind of like, okay, that's great that you think that that's what you're here to do, but like, ask the 3 whys, like why,
Yes. Exactly.
Then I probably get to why it matters.
Yes, 100%. No, I love that. So, Daneal, in closing, for the listeners who have been inspired by your thoughts right now and who sort of want to learn more, they want to reach out to you and so forth, what is the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, that's an easy one. LinkedIn.
right? It's the easy one. And
Yeah,
I'll include a link to your LinkedIn profile within the show notes as well, so anyone
pretty
can reach
well
out.
live in LinkedIn.
Don't we all, right? I mean, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with LinkedIn, but yeah, it is what
Don't
it
we
is.
all?
I know. Exactly. Well, Daneal, this was great. Thank you a lot for the time. Love the insights you gave us. And I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy it. And I look forward to having you again at some point in the future. And we can look back and see how the world has changed.
That would be so cool. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Thank you. Bye bye.